On the morning of the 17th of January 1991, French Jaguars found themselves in a very daring and courageous situation, flying just above the sand over a sturdy hornet's nest. A few aircraft were hit, but none shot down. In this video, I would like to tell you about the French Jaguars in the Gulf War. Eventually reaching a grand total of 28 aircraft in theatre, completing 615 combat sorties in their Jaguar As, the French aviators and ground crew proved the effectiveness of the French Air Force's ability to work within its first major coalition force since the Suez Crisis. The Sepcat Jaguar was an Anglo-French design, being operated mainly by both the French and the British. In the Gulf War, the British were using their Jaguar GR1Bs, with the French still using their older Jaguar A. The Jaguar A lacked the sophisticated avionics and navigation systems of the GR1B, as well as the inferior ADOR Mark 102 engines to the GR1B's ADOR Mark 104s. They were certainly on the back foot in terms of the latest tech, however that didn't necessarily hinder them too much. The French Jaguars would make their way down to the Gulf on the 14th of October 1990 at Al Assa Air Base, an almost completed civilian airport which was used in the Gulf War to base all French fighter aircraft. Due to the threat of chemical warfare and Scud ballistic missiles, all coalition bases had to train their personnel in the event of a potential gas attack, or Scud missile alert. Indeed, on the first night of the Gulf War, several Scud warnings were given out just before the first wave of Jaguars went out to strike Iraqi targets. At 1 AM, the personnel at Al Assa woke up to a Scud missile warning. When it was all over, they went out to ready the aircraft for the first attack. Following a few more Scud missile warnings, at 6 AM the aircraft were ready. Once the aircrews had been through their final briefings, they headed out to the aircraft, and at 7 AM on the 17th of January 1991, 12 French Jaguars thundered down the runway at Al Assa. Their target would be the hardened air shelters at Al Jabba Airport, 60 kilometers southwest of Kuwaiti City. Each pilot's call sign would be Jupiter 1 through to 12, with the fleet of 12 aircraft being divided into two groups. Some Jaguars would be carrying 500-pound bombs, with the others carrying Beluga cluster bombs. US Air Force F-4Gs and F-16s would be providing seed with their AGM-88 harms, to try and eliminate as many SAM sites as possible, but they could not help the Jaguars through their ordeal. At roughly 7:40, they reached the C-135FR tankers. Refueling proved to be a challenge as the tankers had just entered a turn, and no time could be wasted waiting for them to line up again. A heavily loaded Jaguar A could sometimes need minimum afterburner to keep up with the tanker. At 8:45 they reached Kuwait, hitting the deck at 50 feet and at 480 knots. Then they dropped the fuel tanks, and the first group of 6 went through seamlessly, only a few gunshots being fired at them. However, their bomb run had woken up the hornet's nest. The second group were also 50 degrees off, their navigation equipment being so poor that when they figured out they were heading slightly off the first wave, it was too late for them to change course. They decided to target armoured vehicles and were being fired at by Shulkers, AKs and SA-7 surface-to-air missiles. From Jupiter 12's perspective, things weren't looking too good. Captain Hummel was hit by an SA-7 to the number 2 engine, setting it ablaze. He had to shut it down. Jupiter 9 also received a hit, this time from an AK bursting open the left engine's oil. After contacting an AWACS E3, they were directed to Jubail Air Base in eastern Saudi Arabia, where USAF personnel greeted them. They took 2 French pilots to the command planners at the base. They told them that they had flown over Al Jabba Airport and right over Iraqi divisional headquarters. Jupiter 12's Jaguar A now rests at the French Air and Space Museum. She hasn't been restored since, as the fire caused damage to the aircraft's spine, making it a write-off. Now let's hear about Jupiter 11. After realising that the second group were off target, Captain Mayan started scanning, looking left and right for targets. However, he was shot in the head by a bullet. He went blind and pulled the stick upwards in order to not hit the ground. After a few long seconds, he came to his senses. A single bullet from an AK-47 had entered through the canopy, through the helmet and out the other end, missing anything vital, but nevertheless making it a hard task keeping the aircraft in the air. After radioing in his current situation, the other pilots tried to find him, but they couldn't in the low light. They told him to pop a flare and instantly saw 1, 2 and 3 flares not too far away. The captain limped himself back to Al Asser Air Base, where he made the best landing of his career before taxiing to the ramp while still in the cockpit and was given a blood transfusion. He was flying back to France, needing 10 stitches to repair his scalp. Meillan's first mission was not all downsides. Sure, he had been shot in the head and was repatriated back to France, but he had gone to explain to the French Tactical Air Command that due to the bad navigation systems, the whole second group had not reached Al Jabba at the right point and needed GPS. They gave him a bag of cash and he went to the nearest hardware store to buy several dozen units of ProNav 100. After this first mission, low-level tactics were scrapped, and the aircraft were brought up to 20,000 feet to do medium-level bombings, using their fairly accurate CCIP. Originally starting at 40-degree dives from 20,000 feet, the dust from the desert would block their view. They changed their approach to 60-degree dives, from 20,000 feet down to 15,000 feet. GPS also made it possible to bomb in a horizontal line. Only one bullet would enter a French Jaguar at medium altitude for the rest of the war, compared to the 1 write-off and 2 damaged at the end of the first mission. Jaguar A's would also use 57 AS-30 Nords to strike ground targets, as well as 100mm rockets. On the last day of operation, 2 GBU-12s were lasered and dropped on the 28th of February 1991. In the grand scheme of things in Operation de Guerre, the French Jaguar A's had flown 615 combat sorties along a total of 28 aircraft deployed, dropping 1,467 500-pound bombs. The French chose to phase out the Jaguars in 2005, and with little to no upgrades to their aging Jaguar A's. However, the British decided to upgrade their Jaguars to GR3 standard, making a much more capable machine. Thank you very much for watching. If you are a fan of the Sappercat Jaguar in combat, why not watch this video I made on the Jaguar GR1s in the Gulf War.